Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oak Show. Hope you're doing well while the rest of the world is burning to the ground because of the coronavirus. We got a good show for you today, and you should have some extra time to watch it. So hopefully you're doing okay. I know there's a lot of serious stuff going on in the world, but we're doing our best to communicate hope and truth and give some direction. And excited about our show today, and I hope that you will take away a lot of great things from it. Before we get into it though, if you have not yet, go ahead and subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, hit that notification bell. That lets you know when new stuff comes online, and we're always producing content. We'd love to get more of that out to you and let you know when that comes online, and hitting that notification bell is the best way for you to keep in touch with us. Go ahead and comment if you have comments, and we'd love to share all of these things with you, and very excited about my guest today. Our guest today is Dusty Shelhamer. Dusty, we have been trying to get on the show for like 3 years or so, something, I don't know. We've scheduled and rescheduled and then adjusted, and finally Dusty's on lockdown in his home office in Texas. So we thought this would be a good time to talk, but super stoked to have Dusty with us. Dusty is a personal friend, someone I consider a strong friend, a true friend, and I'm thankful for him. But his testimony and his story is great. And today we're going to talk about Dusty, about his story, and really talk about the life of a first responder. Dusty has been involved in the first responder world for many, many years as a firefighter, as a paramedic, as a police officer, also has worked with the Department of Homeland Security, was part of the rescue efforts at Ground Zero following 9/11, also in Oklahoma City and in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. So a lot of big events that he's been a part of, and has also come through Mighty Oaks. So excited to talk to him. Dusty, thanks for taking some time out of your schedule to hang out with us today.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me on. Schedule's pretty open right now. The whole world being on lockdown, we're all working remotely. So
Right.
it kind of worked out today that I was able to be around.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
No, it's awesome. I'm glad the time worked out, and we just spent a couple days together this last weekend in Texas, which was really cool. Trying to hunt a little bit, didn't get a lot, but got a little bit, so that was fun. And yeah, it's always good to hang out. Dusty, you've been involved in just about every aspect, I think, of the first responder world. Talk to us a little bit about that. Maybe tell us about where you grew up and how you got involved in really a lifetime of service and helping folks.
Well, I grew up in a small town in central West Texas, if there is such a thing. It's called Brownfield, Texas. It's just outside of Lubbock. Grew up in a farming and oil field community, and just had a normal life. I mean, I had a decent life. Mom and Dad were good to us. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we always had everything we needed.
Yeah.
And being a small town like that, it was pretty easy to be a leader in everything that you did. So I was captain of the basketball team. I was president of the FFA. Just stayed involved and active, and kind of always seemed to have a leadership role. And that kind of played out into my adulthood, because when I went off to college, I decided I wanted to be a police officer, and went in and got my associate's degree in criminal justice, and broke out to be a police officer, and got out there. And even back in the late 80s, early 90s, I found out that police weren't well respected. So every time I'd go on a police call, I'd see the firemen show up, and everybody loved the firemen and hated to see the cops. So I thought, man, maybe that's where I need to be. So I shifted over into the fire service and started a career in firefighting and rescue. And our department that I went to work for had a division that you could be a police officer, a firefighter, and a paramedic. Yeah. So that kind of fit well with the department that I wanted to be in. So I already had the police training, so it was easy for them to slide me into that position. So they didn't have to train me to be a police officer already. They had already trained me to be a firefighter and a paramedic. So I slid into that position, and being a new program and me already having it, I immediately kind of went to the top of that program. So as that rolled along, we started a little rescue team. We wanted to try to get a rescue team together and serve the state of Texas. And we were all pretty young, and we wanted to develop this team to basically be a rapid response SWAT team for the state of Texas. And we got it up and running, and as soon as we got it up and running, Oklahoma City bombing happened. and we deployed out to Oklahoma City bombing. And the tragedy that was, everything went well from what we were trying to do. They saw a need in us. They saw that they could use us. And the federal government started to say, hey, we want to do this nationwide. So we started the program, the National DMATS, Disaster Medical Assistance Teams. And we would just start traveling around to major disasters and help out where needed every time it overloaded the natural system. That eventually consumed me and took over my life, basically, because they just started deploying us more and more and more. So, we started doing all the major disasters, Del Rio floods, and Oklahoma City bombing, like I said, Houston floods. They had Tropical Storm Allison that came in and flooded Houston in 2000, and that kind of skyrocketed my career. I don't know, there's a series of unfortunate events, or just they always say there's no coincidences with God. I don't know, but I was at Tropical Storm Allison, and my commander couldn't make a meeting, so she sent me to a meeting and said, hey, you need to go to this meeting. I can't make it. So I went downtown to a emergency management coordinators meeting and walked into the wrong meeting. And when I walked in, sat down, thought I knew what I was doing, I'd actually walked into the management support team meeting for the initial operation. And me being the way I am, it didn't take me long to proceed to tell them I thought they were doing it wrong. Kind of upset a few people, but there was one guy in there that after the meeting pulled me aside and he goes, hey man, I kind of like what you're doing. We want you to join the management support team.
Wow.
So that skyrocketed my career into that. Having said all that, it pretty much just, I guess God put me where he needed me to be, but I kind of bypassed a lot of steps and always made my way to the top of the ladder. And so when I got in that management support team and started rolling with those guys, I just started going to every event. We would do the disasters, but we would also do the non-disasters. I've done standby for a lot of State of the Union addresses. We've done Olympics. We've done G8 summits down in Georgia. So I had a lot of good things that went along. And then kind of seemed like after 9/11, the career kind of started taking a dark side. And the tragedies kind of just started to build up and mount, after spending all the time at World Trade Center. Then, you had the space shuttle disaster right behind that. Then we had Hurricane Katrina on top of that. Everything just kind of started to pile up on me, and didn't really notice it. I guess PTSD wasn't a term back in the days. We would talk about it at Ground Zero. They kind of hinted around to it. We would have to meet with a psychologist every morning. We worked 12-hour shifts. We'd have to meet with a psychologist in the mornings, go work our shift, come back out, meet with the psychologist afterwards. And that was our daily routine. We'd spend 10 hours on and an hour on each side, front and back, with the psychologist. Well, 587 happened, which was a plane crash that happened in Queens, and we rolled out to it and spent the day at 587 helping recover that tragedy. That was American Airlines flight at 587 that crashed in Queens about a month, and I guess it was November after 9/11. So it was still fresh. Everybody was scared it was another terrorist attack. We worked that, came back to see our psychologist, was talking to him, and everything was going pretty good. And that kind of started to develop the trend of, hey, these guys are going through a lot and seeing a lot. So it never really bothered me that much at the time because I was still young and gung-ho, and I would go from one deployment to something else and just packing all these tragedies down on top of each other. And when you're working on the next one, you forgot about the last one, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all of that rocked along through my career. Cost me my first marriage. My first wife wanted me to quit, and I wouldn't quit. I told her, it's kind of great. Me and her got a great relationship now. She's a sweetheart. We get along fantastic. We've got a 16-year-old autistic son together, and so we still get along wonderful. But she told me that the day she knew that our marriage was over is I had came back for a few days during the middle of 9/11, and they would send us home for a couple of days every once in a while to kind of repack, reorganize, get some stuff together, and then deploy you back out. Well, I was sitting at home with her, and we were sitting in the hot tub together one night, and I just broke down and started crying in the hot tub, which was insane for me at the time. I mean, it was just, even I was mad at myself for that. I didn't know what was going on. Well, she asked me, she said, why don't you quit doing this? And I looked her dead in the eye and I told her, I said, I'm already messed up. There's no sense in somebody else having to go through what I've gone through. And she was like, okay, I get it. And at that point, she knew that our marriage was over. She tried to hold it together for a while, rocked along. I just wouldn't quit deploying. I just stayed gone all the time. So we finally decided it was time to divorce, and we did. Not something I'm super proud of, but it's just the way it happened. We still get along great and fantastic. Well, I rocked along through there and got through all the deployments and put my 20 years in and decided it was time to get out. I had a real good friend that reached out to me and said, hey, you've got your 20, let's retire. He works in the oil field and said, let's go make some money. So I got out and went into the private sector and became an oil field safety, which at the time was great, man. I doubled my salary and things were rocking along. I had re-met my current wife at the time, and we were getting our relationship going, but things started going bad, and I didn't really understand what was going on. All that tragedy just kind of started coming back out, and I didn't understand it, but I was very mean to her. I never was abusive, but I was very cold and callous to her and just didn't care. If I did something to make her mad, she'd get mad. And instead of me trying to correct it, I'd just say, oh, well, get over it and move on. And that's not healthy for any relationship, believe it or not.
Right.
Contrary to what people think.
Right.
And so anyway, as that rocked on, I started pushing her away. We'd gotten married and I'd pushed her out and divorced. And then a really good friend of mine, I had been working with the Mighty Oaks. I'm going to back up a second. I had been working with the Mighty Oaks a little bit down at the Blaylock Ranch when Chad was getting it going and getting it rolling. He would bring the guys down to the Blaylock Ranch, and was nowhere near the setup we have down there right now. But we had the river and a bunch of kayaking, and we had some cliffs and climbing walls, and we would set up adventure courses for these guys. And believe it or not, at the time we would take them hunting. We'd have hunting trips. And so Chad and Jeff Blaylock were good friends, and I think they served together in Marine Recon. So that's kind of how I got tied to Chad. Was Jeff would invite me down because they would need some help, need a medic down there when they were doing this kind of stuff. So I'd go down and be a medic and help out. And some of those guys would have some issues that, good thing, that I'd be there, we'd work on and help them get through. Well, as my life started to deteriorate, Jeff reached out to Chad and said, hey, have you checked on Dusty lately? And Chad's like, no, what's going on with Dusty?
Yeah.
And I don't know. So one day out of the blue, I get a phone call from Chad Robichaux, and he say, man, how's everything going? I'm typical. I can't say I'm the typical veteran because I never was a veteran and never have served, but I'm the typical alpha male. Like, nothing's wrong. I'm fine. Everything's good. He's like, no, man, something's going on. I hear things aren't going too good. I don't know what you've been hearing, but everything's fine. I'm okay. So we started, Chad has a way of kind of getting in you, whether it's he irritates you enough that you finally break down and tell him what he wants to hear, or he just crawls in there. I don't know. But he finally got it out of me that, things were kind of going bad, and he invited me out to the program. And at the time, there hadn't been any civilians go through the program. It had all been veterans. And I believe that there may have been a couple of first responders that had gone through, but they went through as veterans. The first responder side really hasn't been recognized yet.
Right.
So Chad kept telling me to come out, and I'm pretty pro-veteran and pro-military, but I was denied. I was like, no, man, that's for veterans. You need to save that for those guys. Those guys need it. I don't need it. Typical answer that you hear from everybody else. Those guys need help. I don't need help.
Right.
That's pretty common. So finally, he convinced me to come out, and I went out there to Skyrose, and you talk about a fish out of water. I did not feel like I fit in day one. People who have gone through Mighty Oaks understand this, but people who have never been probably won't. But man, the very first day when everybody's kind of coming in and coming together, there's this, what I call the dog sniffing day, where everybody's kind of
Right.
sniffing around at each other, trying to size each other up and
Right.
trying to figure out who's who and who's what. And you know, you're still in that macho tough mode and you're trying to figure out who's tougher, who's the bad guy here, you know. And so I'm kind of way out of place here because I got all these military veterans around, and here I am, just me. So it really struck me how the program started out, and kind of hit me pretty hard. And it wasn't after the first day I didn't feel really out of place anymore. I kind of felt like, all right, we all have something in common, whatever it is. We all have a different story, but we all have something in common. So I had grown up in a Christian home, grew up not going to church every day, not going, you know, we were what I would call holiday churchgoers. We'd go on Easter Sunday and Christmas and that kind of stuff, but we weren't solid churchgoers. But I had a good faith in God. I just wasn't a good follower of God. And there's a big difference there, which I came to learn. So anyway, we're rocking along, going through there, and you know, Mighty Oaks kind of got slowly started digging into me, and Jeremy's one of the success stories of me right there, because at the time I didn't know Jeremy. Jeremy didn't know me, but just kind of like sometimes a preacher does when you go to church on Sunday, you feel like they're speaking directly at you and they're not talking to anybody else in the room. So some of the things he was saying was going right straight at me. We went out on September 9th. We went down to a jiu-jitsu gym. And at the time we were going down and training jiu-jitsu, and Chad was showing us jiu-jitsu and trying to give us an outlet, a stress outlet and things. And so we went down to jiu-jitsu on Wednesday, I guess. Yeah, Wednesday, September 9th, we went down to jiu-jitsu. And that kind of struck with me good. It was like, you know, this is pretty neat. I'd never even heard the word jiu-jitsu. And we'll get into that story here in a minute. So we come back that night and we're all sitting on the back porch of Skyrose, and Jeremy had kind of gathered us up on the back porch, and we're sitting around they have this little fire pit out there, and we're all sitting around the fire pit. And I was sitting in a corner chair and was sitting back there, and Jeremy's talking and carrying on and really speaking to us. And he just stopped and he said, "Hey, is anybody getting anything out of this? Is anything happening right now?" And it just hit me. I was like, man, it just, you know, they always say that just God comes into your heart. And he did at that moment. He just came right into my heart. And I raised my hand and I said, yeah. I said, I really feel like I want to be closer to God. So I stood up, walked over, and there's a little side area there. And Jeremy and Chad kind of took me off to the side over there, and we talked. And I had asked God to come back into my life that night. When I was younger, I went to church camp. I don't know, 9 or 10 years old. I went to church camp in Brownwood, Texas. And I asked God to come in my heart then. And I don't know that you kind of wonder if it's real back then or not, if you're just doing it because everybody at church camp's doing it or whatever. But at 44 years old, I knew exactly what it meant. And so that night I had, I tell everybody I found God in jiu-jitsu on the same day. So it's kind of a neat program there, because that's kind of what's carried me on through the rest of my adulthood. So we walk around through there, and on September 11th, Jeremy baptized me there at Skyrose Ranch.
Yeah.
So, which kind of changed my life in the sense of the way I think about 9/11. 9/11 had been a terrible day for me. It had been awful. And every time 9/11 would roll around, I'm not a drinker. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't ever had a drug problem. I've been pretty fortunate with that. But on 9/11, I would go off and isolate myself and sit at a sports bar and drink. And then a couple of times that Jeff would just have to come pick me up and leave my truck and drive me home. And it would just be the one night that I would just twist off. Very fortunate that there was no ill effects of that. But, you know, other than that, I could go the rest of the year and not have a drink. But anyway, so 9/11 was a deep, dark time for me. And now I'm able to look back at 9/11. 9/11 is my birthday. I got baptized by Jeremy there. So that started my road to recovery. And recovery that I didn't even know I needed. I didn't really know I was in a bad spot until I turned around and started looking around me. Well, testimony night there at Mighty Oaks, we do testimonies, and So we're all sitting around trying to get up the courage to get up there and tell our story. And I still kind of feel like I don't necessarily fit in. Got all these veterans, war veterans, getting up there, and they're telling some great stories. And great's a bad term, I guess, to say, but they're telling some stories that are pretty impressive. They've been in some dark places and had some dark times in their life. And I'm sitting there trying to think, man, I had a great childhood. A lot of these guys had crappy childhoods. I had a great childhood. My problems didn't really start till adulthood. Well, these guys had crappy childhoods, and then they had problems through adulthood, and then they had to go through war, and then they had to go through all these other issues. So I'm not really having the courage to tell my story. And it's voluntary. When you get up there on testimony night, it's voluntary. And they say, we ask that you tell your story, but you don't have to. Well, Chris Carlisle, God bless his soul. I'll never forget him. He's sitting there asking, telling everybody in his knife hand way, who's next, who's next, who's next? Well, then all of a sudden he just goes, Shelhamer, you're next. And man, it caught me off guard because I thought this was voluntary.
It's voluntold. You're voluntold.
So me being from a paramilitary organization, I just received a direct order. I got up and went and sat in the chair and spilled my guts. And as I'm telling my story, I'm struggling to get through it and really hadn't really told it to anybody. And as I'm breaking down, I look out there and see these war heroes, what I consider class act war heroes, are breaking down and crying with me. And it was really kind of a movement moment to me to realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe it's normal for me to feel this way. And maybe it is. So one of the good things that came out of my testimony night is some of the leadership of Mighty Oaks at the time took a step back and realized that, hey, we're missing a whole group of people here. The first responders need our attention as well. They already knew the progress they were making with military veterans and their wives and their families, but they were like, man, we need to do something for our first responders. And so that was a very positive thing that night. Well, after my testimony, they asked me to present my story at the community graduation. Part of one, it was a pretty unique story, and two, it was on 9/11 that we were doing our graduation ceremony, and I had served at 9/11, so it's pretty good story for the community here as well. So I was kind of paraded up for one, I had a good story, and two, it was very fitting for the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a friend. I'd made a friend there at Mighty Oaks, and he was a current Navy SEAL. Name's Jonathan. Jonathan and me kind of hung out that week. We kind of got to know each other, and we're riding in the van together down to the community hall to get ready for graduation. As soon as we pull in the parking lot, I look over at Jonathan, and I say, Jonathan, my ex-wife's here. And he goes, how do you know? And I said, she's sitting in the back parking lot in her car, or in a rental car. I said, that's her. He goes, are you sure? And I said, I'm pretty sure that's her. And he's like, well, let's just go inside. So I'd already called Mara and told her that I'd been saved, and even though we were divorced and apart, she was ecstatic that I got saved. She's been a good Christian woman her entire life, and she just was through the roof happy that I had finally asked God to come into my heart for real. So anyway, we go into the community center, and as we're in the community center, we're walking around and kind of talking, meeting with the public in general, just kind of shaking everybody's hand and talking to them. And this lady walks up to me with a sack and a bag, and she said, are you Dusty Shelhamer? And I'm like, yeah. How does she know me? And she hands me this sack, and she says, Mara asked me to give you this. Okay. So I open it up, and inside this bag was a Bible. And she had given me this Bible. And there was also a necklace that I wore that she had made for me of one of the first elk that I had killed. Elk have ivory, and she made a necklace out of it. And I had taken it off and quit wearing it when we got divorced, but she had gave it back to me. So when I saw the bag and the necklace, I knew she was there, which my thoughts were that she was there in the parking lot. And I look over and I see her standing there. So I go over and I give her the biggest hug, and I say, thanks for coming. She flew out from Texas on her own dime to see me graduate from this program. Well, anyway, I give her the biggest hug, and I said, thanks for coming. I'm glad you're here. And she stopped me in my tracks. She goes, I didn't come here for you. And I was kind of like, what? She goes, I came here for God. She goes, I've been asking for 8 years for God to come into your heart. And now that he did, I owed it to him to be here. So that was kind of like, whoa, it was kind of a kick in the teeth, but it was kind of mind blowing at the time too. It's like, wow. So anyway, I get up and I do my speech with the community and talk to the community and tell a toned down version of my story to the community. And things go well. And we return home. And Mara's living in Weatherford, Texas at the time, 3 hours away from where I live. And we start trying to rebuild our relationship. And she had a lot of trust issues, which she rightfully deserved to have. So we started working through those. And it's kind of funny. Me and her are both outdoors people. And we were trying to figure out how we could get together and talk, but neither one of us wanted to. We really didn't feel like we belonged in a romantic setting at the time. We needed to get some things ironed out, but it didn't need to be. So I have a bow fishing boat. So I hooked onto the bow fishing boat. This is about as redneck as it gets, so bear with me. I hooked onto the bow fishing boat and I drove to Weatherford and picked her up at about 8:30 at night. We went and got some dinner, went down to Lake Worth in Fort Worth, Texas, and put the boat in the water. And if you know anything about bow fishing, you drive around real slow and you putt around with the spotlights on and you see carp and fish swimming and you shoot them with a bow. And we drove around till like 3 a.m. shooting carp and getting things straightened out. And it was a great place to talk. It was a great neutral. There wasn't any expectations or anything. So we slowly started to get our life worked back out. Well, she moved back home and we got remarried, and we've been making a go at it ever since. So things have been going great. So it's kind of a success story. Going back to jiu-jitsu, we're going to backtrack and side swap there. Chad had told me when I got home to find a jiu-jitsu gym. He goes, man, you're pretty good at this. You did okay. Go find a jiu-jitsu gym when you get home, but call me when you get there because I want to make sure that it's not some crackpot gym and some fly-by-night gym in a mall or something. So I go back to Midland and find a place called Bastos Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I call Chad. I say, hey, I found this place in Midland called Bastos Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Chad goes, is that Bruno Bastos? And I said, I don't know. I'm in the parking lot. And he says, just give me a second. I'll call you back. A few minutes later, he calls me and says, hey, that's Bruno Bastos' gym. Go sign up. Okay, so I walk into Bastos Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's one of the co-owners of the gym is Bradley Barnes, who's a Mighty Oaks alumni now. I walk in, I say, hey, I want to sign up for jiu-jitsu. And he's like, okay, great. We have a 2-week free trial. And, just come on Monday night at 6 and you can try the beginner's class. I'm like, no, I need to sign up. He's like, no, you got 2 weeks free. Just come and see if you like it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Here's my card. I need to sign up right now. And Brad's kind of like, okay, and I'll take your money. He took my money and signed me up. Well, I started in jiu-jitsu. The day I got home, I went and signed up for my first class. And Bruno and me just hit it off really well. Bruno's a great guy. Been an incredible coach after all of this, not only through jiu-jitsu. He's quick to get on me and tell me when I'm not doing the right thing anyway. But anyway, we go through there, and since I've started training with Bruno, I've won a Pan American championship. I've won a Master World Championship. And just this past year in Anaheim, in December 14th, I won my no-gi World Championship. So I've got 2 World Championships and a Pan American Championship with Bruno since starting Mighty Oaks. Since Mighty Oaks got me into
And you won your first gold medal within like 6 months of starting training, right?
Yeah, I won Pan Americans within 6 months of starting to train.
Incredible.
So it's been pretty incredible.
Crazy. Today, our guest is, first of all, introduce you to someone who's familiar, not a guest, Chad Robichaux. Chad is not always with us. Today he is. 2 weeks ago, Chad was in studio, which was awesome. Today he is hiding out in his bunker somewhere in the hills of Arizona. So it's good to have Chad here. And our special guest today is retired Navy SEAL Jason Redman. And Jason is coming to us remotely as well, but glad that he could be with us. Jason is got an incredible story. He's written the book, The Trident, The Forging and Reforging of a Navy SEAL Leader. And he'll talk about that today and tell his story. But guys, thanks for joining us. We've been trying to do this one for a couple weeks and finally landed on it. So appreciate both of you taking the time to talk. Jason, man, why don't we just jump in? Tell us your story. I love to hear about how people end up in the military. It's always funny to me when you talk to civilians, people who have not been in the military. They always assume that the only reason you go into the military is either because your parents were in the military, a grandparent was in the military, or you had nothing else to do with your life. Those are the only three categories, right? And it's always so much more than that. Tell us where you came from, where you grew up, and how you ended up in the Navy.
Jeremy, well, first off, thanks for having me on. Big shout out to the Muddy Oaks Foundation for everything you guys are doing to give back to veterans, for your service as a Marine, and Chad for your service also, man, honored to be on. So yeah, parents were in the military. I had nothing else to do with my life. I had nowhere else to go, so I joined it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So you became a SEAL. You took the easy route.
So no, but there is truth though. I did come from a military family. So where am I from? I was born in the great state of Ohio. And go Bucks. But I left there at a young age. Parents divorced when I was very young, and just started a journey that a lot of young kids can empathize with. You know, that whole bouncing back and forth between mom and dad over the years. The good news is it taught me to be flexible and resilient as a kid, because I bounced up and down the East Coast, Ohio to North Carolina to South Carolina, brief stint in Georgia, Florida, lived in the Virgin Islands for a while, which gave me a great appreciation for the water, and grew up with a very strong patriotic mindset and family. You know, stories. My dad was ex-Army. He was an Army paratrooper and rigger. So I grew up with these really cool stories. And I remember looking at the pictures of my dad jumping out of airplanes. I mean, I had his old Army jackets. He actually had an old DRMO'd parachute, which for those that don't know, DRMO is like the place where we get rid of military gear. And he had an old parachute that had been DRMO'd, and he got it. And I used to play with it when I was a kid, man. I'd put on the rigging, and I was just like, this is amazing. Someday I'm going to jump out of airplanes. And listen,
Marine called the RMO supply.
Yeah.
we get the Navy's dermo and use it for our everyday wear.
Yeah. You know, you could actually find some good stuff in dermo. You know, I've been dermo shopping before back in the day. So before 9/11, when we weren't operating out of the Golden Connex box.
Yeah.
But you know, just grew up with these amazing stories of military individuals in my family. My grandfather was a decorated World War II pilot. He flew a B-24 in the European theater, flew all of his missions and then some. He actually, his plane got shot down and they weren't able to bail out. And thankfully it was in the winter over, they were launching out of Italy, and there was in the winter, and they crash landed in Yugoslavia. He literally landed in a snow-covered field, and everybody survived. And they got out and they evaded their way back to friendly lines. Wow. And he got the Distinguished Flying Cross for that, and then numerous air medals. So fascinated with that. My great uncle was shot down in the Pacific. My dad was in the Army. So I grew up, and that's all I ever wanted to do. You know, my dad told me about the SEAL teams when I was about 14, or at least about the SEALs. And trust me, I am about the most unlikely candidate, you know, especially back then. I mean, when I was 14 years old, I was literally the 95-pound weakling. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'8" and about 170 pounds. And when I was 14, I literally was probably 5 feet, if that, and 90 pounds, soaking wet. And I don't know what it is. It lit a fire in me. I was not a big athlete or anything. I like to play outdoors. I like to do stuff like that. I was fascinated with G.I. Joe when I was a kid in the military, but I definitely did not have the traits that most people would think of that would become a Navy SEAL. And as a matter of fact, I mean, when I told people about it, they laughed their face off at me. But it just, there was something in me that clicked. And I said, that's what I want to do. I had done a lot of swimming when I was in the Virgin Islands, so I knew I was very comfortable in the water. And I just focused on, hey, man, if I'm going to do this, I got to start working out. I got to start figuring things out. I went out for the football team. I started wrestling, and I just started working out all the time, and basically got to where I did well on the SEAL screening test and earned a slot to go to Buds. You know, joined the Navy when I was 17, still in high school, and as soon as I graduated, headed to boot camp.
Yeah, man, what an awesome story. You went into the military, and September 13th, 2007, you were doing an operation in Iraq. And talk about, I could tell a story, but you could tell it better than I can. So tell us about that story. Tell us about what happened on that day.
Yeah, and you guys may be familiar with the area. The Marines owned the battle space in the Al Anbar province in 2007.
Yeah.
The second or the second the group out of Camp Lejeune. I'm totally blanking right now. But basically, we were the special operations component for Al Anbar. So we went after high-level and mid-level targets throughout the Al Anbar province. And there, Fallujah was still a pretty dangerous place, although we had pushed a lot of the insurgency in the heart of Al-Qaeda up to the northeast, outside of Fallujah into an area known as Karma. And I don't know if either of you guys have ever been to Karma. A lot of the Marines were in the outposts there, an incredibly dangerous place. I know a lot of Marines were killed, a ton of IEDs. And our very first mission of that deployment, we went after the #1 leader for the Anbar province and got into a huge firefight. I wasn't actually on this mission yet. We were still doing turnover, but kind of half of our team, half of the oncoming team. And right off the bat, very first mission, one of our guys was wounded. We lost a SEAL, Petty Officer Clark Swedler. Another SEAL was severely wounded, and one of our Iraqis was killed on that mission. And it kind of just started this momentum for the entire deployment of, we're going to get this guy. And we hunted this guy throughout the entire deployment. Every time we went into Karma, and that became our focus while we were there. Every time we went in there, we got into firefights, which fast forward to the end of the deployment, September 13th, 1 week before going home, we had missed this guy. We just could not find him. We couldn't get a specific time and location he was going to be. So September 12th, we got word, hey, the guy you've been looking for is going to be in a specific place in Karma. And it was a place we knew well. We had gotten into several firefights. It was in a place that normally you're not allowed to go, and I'll just leave it at that. So I really didn't think that mission was going to be approved just because of some of those reasons, but it went all the way up to the top, and we got the green light about 11 p.m. We had already been doing mission planning, but allowed us pretty quick turn. We launched about 1 a.m., and I was fortunate enough to be the assault force commander for the actual target takedown. Came in, took the target down, and nothing was there. We could tell we had just missed somebody. There was activity. You could see remnants of people having recently been there, but it was actually empty. But we did start finding all kinds of explosives. We found IED making components. So basically, we wrapped all that stuff up, and we were going to blow it up, and then we thought that was going to be it. We thought it was going to be a quiet night, and unfortunately, we thought we had missed that guy again. So probably about 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m., our snipers called down and said, hey, man, we got a whole bunch of activity on another house about 150 yards away. We just watched about 5 individuals run out the front door across the street into some vegetation, and they appear to be hiding in the vegetation. So my boss came up to me and said, hey, man, let's go wrap these guys up. 3 a.m. after we flew in on helicopters and they're running away, usually that's a sign they're not good people. So took my team and maneuvered up from the south to the north, and basically, long story short, walked into a very well-executed ambush. Our leader had left the position that we were in, went to that house to the north, and that was his bed down location for the night, and had a very robust security element, which we had been warned if we got too close wore suicide vests. And the last 5 guys were the last part of his security detail. And there was a road that ran up from the house we were in and ran in front of that house where he was. And then there was a field across the street, and there was vegetation, this vegetated field in between. And I think what they believed is we were either going to drive up to that house or we were going to land our helicopters. because what we didn't know is the last part of those 5 guys, the security detail, they had staged an ambush line of about what we estimate anywhere from 12 to 15 individuals facing north. We came up from the south, but a very well-disciplined force. They maintained their position. And, but at this point, we had pushed a gunship up overhead, an AC-130 gunship. For those that don't know, it's an amazing Air Force precision platform that has probably saved more lives on the battlefield than any other asset out there. I owe my life to it from numerous nights, not just this night. But the gunship was letting us know. I kept asking them, can you see weapons? Can you see anything? And they said, no, they just appear to be laying there. As we were pushing up, the gunship said, hey, if right now where you're walking, you're going to miss them. They said, you need to turn to the northeast, turn to, about, 45 degrees. So we did. Unfortunately, 3 members of our team did not. So suddenly we were separated, and it created a pretty dangerous situation. We made the decision to push out to the flanks, and then we were going to come back up on the northern open side of the field, link back up, and then push in to grab these guys and question them. Right about the time we were doing that, the last part of our team literally stepped on an enemy fighter that was laying in a fighting position, engaged him. The rest of us were out on the northeast corner of this field, which was directly in line with their ambush line, and the whole world opened up. So 2 PKM machine guns, which is a very large belt-fed weapon with bullets about the size of my thumb, and then multiple AK-47 shooters. So our medic was initially hit, took a PKM round right below the knee, which pretty much severed almost both bones, dropped him right into the ground. One of our other guys ran forward to grab our medic, got stitched up the body. I started shooting and was yelling, which I think attracted their attention to turn both machine guns on me, which I was stitched across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought shot my arm off. I was taking rounds off my helmet, had my left night vision tube shot off. I was taking rounds off my gun, and realized we were in a really bad situation, and turned to try and see if there was anything to try and protect me from bullets. And the only thing, there was a tractor tire about 15 yards behind me, kind of a big John Deere style tractor, and everything else was pretty much thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert. And the house was, I don't know, probably 100 yards away, 125 yards away off to my, from where I was standing, off to the northwest. So when I turned, it was at that point, the guys had fallen back to that tire. I was still out front about 15 yards. I laid down some more fire, and I got up to try and run to the tire. And it was at that point that I caught a machine gun round in the face. It hit me right in front of my ear, traveled through my face, exited the right side of my nose, blew out my right cheekbone, took off most of my nose. Bullet traveled right under my eye, blew out my orbital floor, broke all the bones above my eye. Broke the head of my jaw, shattered my jaw to my chin, and knocked me out. And the guy saw me fall and thought I was dead. To this day, we don't know how long I was out, somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. I'll be honest, I don't remember that. There was no stream of consciousness where I woke up and was like, wow, I've been out. Right. It literally, in my mind, as a matter of fact, I was adamant in the hospital that I never lost consciousness. It was only later when the guys got back that I found out I had drifted in and out. But when I came to, I literally was laying flat on my back, and the gunfight was happening directly over me. I was watching tracer fire travel about 8 inches over me, and quickly realized I was in a bad, in a really bad position. But I also knew there was nothing I could do. I knew I just had to be patient and wait for the guys to hopefully win this fight. I thought my arm had been shot off. When I reached over to feel my arm, what I didn't know is it was kind of pinned under my body, but I had no feeling in my arm. So when I was reaching, I couldn't feel, and I had no feeling. So I thought, great, my arm's been shot off. I've been shot in the face. If you don't do something quickly, you're going to bleed out. I was trying to get my tourniquet on. I wasn't able to do that for a myriad of reasons. And finally, we go through a lot of, trauma medicine and inventory and special operations units. I knew I was recognizing all the signs, my body was shutting down. I was going into shock. I couldn't feel my extremities anymore. Every breath was becoming more of I just felt like I was running a race and could get no breath. I mean, it's just harder and harder to breathe. And I think for the first time I came to grips with, this may be it. You may be going out. And I'll be honest, that made me angry. I was angry that I had allowed myself to get in this position, and I had allowed our guys to get in this position. And I was angry to think that the enemy may get the satisfaction in knowing they killed me. That made me angry also. But then my thoughts, moved to my family. I was married with 3 young kids. My son was 8, my daughter was 5, and my youngest was 2. She hadn't quite turned 3 yet. And that is really what started to occupy my mind, and that I was not going to be able to go home, and I wouldn't see them again. And that was hard. And so anyways, I said, I got to go home. I got to figure out a way. So I called out to God and I said, hey, I need strength to go home. I need it. And amazingly, instantly, I felt this energy, this power. And I went from not being able to move a muscle to however much longer that occurred to getting up. 2 things happened. 1, I had that energy. And 2, this thought popped into my head. And the thought was this: you've got to stay awake to stay alive. And it brought me back to this show that I'd watched. I don't know if you guys ever remember watching the show Baghdad ER. No. So Baghdad ER was a show that was on in like 2004 timeframe, and they followed medical trauma professionals in the combat support hospitals. And I remember, I'll never forget the statistic they gave that if wounded warriors showed up with a pulse, they had a 90% chance of making it home. That's how good our trauma doctors were. And I remember that gave me a lot of solace to know, oh man, if we get wounded, you got a pretty high chance of making it home. And that thought popped into my head laying there. So it was like, stay awake, stay alive. And that strength. So finally, we know that firefight lasted about 40 minutes. We ended up calling the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. We literally called fire directly on our position. The gunship had to deny it the first 2 times. They just said, we'll kill you. You guys are so close. I mean, there's no way we can not hit you. They did some unique things. My team leader, who was our JTAC, and the gunship communicated. It actually changed a lot of the way that we do things on the battlefield because of this. But what they did enabled us to get out of there alive, to take the enemy out, enable us to get out alive, to finally bring the medevac in. And when the medevac came in, my team lead came up and he started dragging me, and I was like, oh my God, stop it. That hurts. So I, went from not being able to move to I got up under my own power and said, hey man, grab my arm, grab my helmet, and I'm going to get on that helicopter. Yeah. So went and climbed on the helicopter, and they flew the rotors off, me and my other 2 teammates, and got us home. I'm still here 96 hours later, found myself in Bethesda Naval Hospital, starting a whole new journey of getting put back together.
What an incredible story. Couple things come to mind. One, it's going to be hard after my kids listen to this to tell them that TV will never help you in your life. So you watch a show, it saves your life. It's going to be really hard for me to change that. So thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. There's so much to that story. The faith piece, were you a person of faith before that? Is that something that was a part of your life, or was it at that moment you had clarity that I just can't do this on my own?
Yes and no. So I was raised in a very strong Christian home. If the doors were open to the church, we were there. But what I call it is blind faith. I'm also an incredibly analytical person. I sometimes wonder why God made me the way he did. I think one of my long direct descendants is probably Doubting Thomas, because I just really struggle with faith. It's because it's you can't see it. No matter how much you study it, sure. It's just something you have to believe based on, faith. And it was something I really struggled with. So I used to call myself a closet Christian sometimes,
Yeah.
But I will tell you that night, I felt something. I used to pray sometimes and say, hey, Lord, if you could just show me, just give me a sign, just show me something that makes me say you exist. And I often speak in churches about this. Be careful what you wish for. Because, I've often asked, how come in biblical times, especially in the New Testament, you see all the miracles, and nowadays we don't see the miracles, but the reality is we do. We just choose to ignore them. We choose to discount them. And I'm a walking miracle. From the amount of blood I lost, doctors told me it's a miracle I survived. And I know that I was ready to go. I mean, I had nothing left when I asked him for help, and suddenly, to go from having nothing left. And literally, I remember I tried to move my right hand, which was not shot, and I couldn't feel it, So yeah, that gave me, that gave me a little clarity. And, I'd love to tell people that since that happened, oh my God, I've never, ever had an issue with faith. I mean, the reality is I'm human and I'm made the way I am, but it is a journey. Faith is a journey, and it is a journey you always have to continue to work on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, in the Bible it talks about faith as something that has both evidence and substance, and we think that it is this ethereal, close your eyes, jump out, and hope it all works out kind of thing, but God asks us to trust him, but he does provide evidence. There is a reason to trust him, and you're right, you pray for those moments, and God is really interested in having a relationship with you, and he'll reveal himself.
Yeah, don't do it my way. Don't do it my way. I don't recommend that way. This whole getting all shot up, and it sucks. But thank you, Lord.
Crazy. Yeah, it's great. You went to the Naval Hospital, and I read in your bio you put a sign over the door or on the door. And tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what I read on your bio. Attention to all who enter here. If you are coming into this room with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere. The wounds I received, there it is. The wounds I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. I am incredibly tough and will make a full recovery. That's incredible. Can you talk about that for a minute? From two perspectives, perhaps. One, a lot of folks suffer a trauma of some kind, and that becomes the reason they're not going to move forward. And you had to decide very, very early on in this journey that was not going to be you. And I think that letter illustrates that.
Attitude is everything, right? And you and I both use, I'm wearing the shirt in honor of you, we both use this get off the X. And I think we both went into combat. You clearly were on the X in that firefight, and you had to at some point get off that X. And I have a story the same. But once we transition back to real life and you're in a hospital, you're in a different X now. You can choose to lay in that hospital bed as a victim and let people enable you the rest of your life and lay in sorrows, or you can get off that X and move forward. And that sign is like, the fact that you did that right away, like, it's just incredible. So it speaks so much of who you are. It's incredible.
What made you at that moment when you're laying in bed decide that was what you needed to do?
That's spot on. I mean, and so there were a series of things, and once again, God works in mysterious ways. I had come through an interesting point in my life. My first book, The Trident, is all about this journey, and it is a journey of leadership, because I had made some big mistakes as a young leader, as a young officer. I was an enlisted guy, became an officer, got a little arrogant, thought a little too highly of my own skills, and stumbled, made some mistakes, and almost got myself kicked out of the SEAL teams. Not because I had made mistakes. I mean, if I had just owned my mistakes and drove forward, people in the military, we're not mistake-free, but it's, are you willing to learn from them and be humble as we drive forward? And I wasn't. I was pushing against it pretty hard, which caused many members of the guys around me to say, hey, man, this guy's dangerous. He's going to get somebody killed. And so much so that I had, like I said, I had made a bad call on a mission, fought against it, and really spiraled down. Thankfully, I had some leaders that believed in me and said, hey, we're going to humble this guy. And they did some unique things. One of those things, sending me to U.S. Army Ranger School, which gave me really exactly what I needed, which was some time to really come to grips with who I was. both my strengths and my weaknesses, to recognize that I wasn't as great as I thought I was, and that, you know, there was a lot of things in my leadership that were lacking. So it started this whole new journey. And I'll be honest, it was one of the hardest journeys I've ever walked, because when you guys know, being in the military, your tactical and operational reputation is everything. Because guys are depending on you to stay alive. They want to know that you have their best interest, the mission, the men, and that you're going to make good tactical and operational decisions based off the best of the knowledge you have, that it's not about you. And I had guys that were like, I don't want to work with that guy again. So it took years for me to slowly earn back the trust and credibility and respect of my teammates. All of that kind of culminated with that Iraq deployment. So here I was, I got my career back on track. I'm getting ready to screen for the next level SEAL team, and, you know, had achieved the next level, you know, commander position, platoon commander position. And of course, then I get wounded. So the funny thing is, when I was laying in that hospital bed, when all that was happening, you know, I will admit it was hard at first. There was probably about a week that I really struggled to figure out, where do I go? You know, my career's over. I'm going to be disfigured and disabled. You know, what do I do? And all of that came to a head when I had somebody in the room that basically had a conversation with somebody else. They were standing off the side of my bed while I had some doctors speaking to me. And they started talking about, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war. They come home broken and battered. They're never going to be the same. And I remember when they left, thinking to myself, man, is that it? Like, is this me? This my future? And it's exactly what Chad talked about. You know, did you buy into the victim mentality? Which, the interesting thing is, I had walked that victim road once before. Because when I got myself in trouble as a leader, I painted myself as the victim. Oh, I'm being thrown under the bus. People just don't like me. And it took a long time to figure out it was my fault. I was the one that put myself on that X. So when I laid in that hospital bed thinking about that, I was like, well, I refuse to sit on this X. I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to feel sorry for myself. And I think, you know, one of the most powerful things that people have is you have a choice. You have a choice on how to deal with adversity. You can lay there and feel sorry for yourself, or you can take charge of your own destiny, your own destination. I love the poem Invictus. You know, the last two lines, you know, I'm the captain of my fate. I'm the master of my soul. And you choose to drive forward. And that's what I chose in that moment. And that's how that sign came to be. It really, there wasn't any thought that came into it. It wasn't something that I mulled over for days. My wife came back into the room, and I just said, never again am I going to, you know, allow somebody else to have pity for me. And we wrote it out. You know, I wrote it out in one shot, and we put it on the door, and it just took on a life of its own after that. I mean, to this day, I mean, millions of people have been motivated and inspired by that sign. I don't have the original. President Bush, I got invited to the White House, and President Bush signed the original, and it's now framed and hangs in the Wounded Ward at Bethesda. At Walter Reed for the Wounded Warriors. So it's been pretty, even Wounded Warriors now reach out to me and say, hey man, I saw your sign, thank you. People with cancer, people in accidents. It's been amazing the impact it's had, all because of one choice: to get off that X and to drive forward and choose positivity over negativity.
Awesome, man. Fantastic. Man, we tried to get this a couple times. Chad and I, you know, our schedules don't always sync, and we were scheduled once and didn't work out, but super stoked it came together. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you guys, and for what you're doing, obviously. And I know Chad and I are talking about we got a faith-based initiative that's coming up here in the near future. So we're working on all that. But
yeah, that's so much. I mean, I'd love to work with you. There's so much that I believe we could do together. We're just so like-minded. I'm just thankful our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Likewise, man. Absolutely. Both you guys, Chad, you know, both you guys and Chad. Thanks, man.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you. And for those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. If you are listening somewhere other than YouTube, thank you for listening. And go over to YouTube. Check out our channel. We've got a lot of great content there. Subscribe. Go ahead and hit the notification bell. You can like the content, share it out. That helps us. And more than anything, it helps those who receive it. So please do that. And we'd love to hear back from you. Thank you. And we'll talk to you next time.